you looking at, fat boy? You must want to get up, don't you? I want my money.
I don't have your money.
A trio of troublemaking students led by a boy named Miles attend school only to pick on classmates they see as weak. Their favorite victim is a fat student named Jimmy Mulligan, who endures their abuse without ever fighting back. At least Jimmy isn't alone. His close friends Andy and Bobby are always there to stand by him. Outside of school, he's surrounded by caring parents who love him deeply. One morning, while heading to class, Jimmy and his friends cross paths with Miles and his gang. The bullies demand that Jimmy hand over $100.
What money?
Coming from a modest family, that amount is far beyond what he can afford. Although Jimmy insists he doesn't have the money, Miles refuses to listen and keeps pressuring him for it. Miles doesn't just target Jimmy.
Up into smaller baby.
He also mocks Bobby for acting in a more feminine way. After Bobby is humiliated in front of their classmates, Jimmy steps in to comfort him and lift his spirits. He then suggests that they grab lunch together at the cafeteria, promising to pay for everyone's meal.
How happy can you possibly get?
When they sit down to eat, Andy and Bobby are amazed by how much food Jimmy manages to finish. Still, his friends never teased him about how much he ate. Later, Andy and Bobby tried to set Jimmy up with a girl named Adrian, since they'd noticed her sneaking glances at him whenever they were in the cafeteria. Not long after, Miles showed up and sat beside Jimmy, demanding the $100 he'd mentioned before. A nearby student, clearly annoyed by Miles's behavior, told him to stop causing trouble and leave.
You're the one who's gonna get...
Feeling challenged by someone he viewed as weak, Miles snapped back, shouting insults at the student. But before things could escalate, a larger and stronger boy stood up, ready to put Miles in his place. Realizing he was outmatched, Miles backed off and quickly left the cafeteria without another word. Later that day, after classes ended, he cornered Jimmy again and ordered him to hand over the money. Jimmy stood his ground, saying he didn't owe Miles anything and didn't even have that much cash. Offended by Jimmy's defiance, Miles lost his temper and began to beat him brutally by the side of the road. Just as Miles finishes assaulting Jimmy, an elderly man appears and warns him that he'll report the attack to the police. Panicking, Miles jumps into his car and speeds away from the scene. The old man then rushes to Jimmy's side, helps him up, and brings him to his home to tend to his wounds. There, he introduces himself as Mr. Action. While resting at his house, Jimmy learns that the man was once a world heavyweight boxing champion.
Yeah, that's me.
Inspired, Jimmy pleads with Mr. Action to teach him how to box so he can finally stand up to Miles and end the bullying. Although Mr. Action agrees that Jimmy should fight back, he admits he's far too old to be his trainer. He promises instead to reach out to some of his old friends who can help with Jimmy's training. Afterward, Mr. Action drives Jimmy home and informs his parents about the assault that took place earlier that day. Jimmy's parents thank Mr. Action for caring for their son and safely bringing him home. They quickly agree to let Jimmy start boxing training under his guidance. Together, they accompany him to a gym owned by a trainer named Manny. Once there, Mr. Action explains Jimmy's situation and the bullying he's been facing. Manny agrees to train him, but only if Jimmy stays committed and doesn't quit when things get hard. With that promise made, Jimmy begins his boxing sessions under Manny's instruction, while Mr. Action carefully observes his development each day. During a break, Jimmy opens up about how Miles keeps demanding $100 from him. Mr. Action then comes up with an idea. He tells Jimmy to raise the amount to $200 but ask for a month's time to pay. He explains that this month will give Jimmy the chance to prepare and defeat Miles once and for all, so he'll never have to pay him anything. The following day, when Miles shows up again to demand the cash, Jimmy confidently repeats Mr. Action's suggestion. Miles hesitated for a moment, thinking over the offer since a month seemed like a long time. In the end, he accepted the deal, tempted by the promise of getting twice the money. For now, Jimmy felt relieved, knowing Miles would leave him alone for the next few weeks. But later that afternoon, during his boxing session with Manny, his energy seemed to fade, and his punches lacked spirit. When Manny asked what was wrong, Jimmy claimed he was simply tired. However, Manny's experienced eye could tell it wasn't his body that was drained, it was his motivation. Concerned, the trainer informed Mr. Action that Jimmy's focus and effort had started to slip during practice. On the way home, Mr. Action brought it up and gently asked Jimmy why he seemed so unmotivated that day. Jimmy confessed that he was feeling worn out and frustrated, believing that all his hard work in training wasn't paying off. He still felt powerless and unable to defend himself whenever Miles picked on him. Seeing Jimmy so discouraged, Mr. Action tried to lift his spirits, reminding him that no effort ever goes to waste and that every struggle teaches something valuable. Later at home, his father also noticed the drop in his motivation. Instead of pressuring him, he told Jimmy that the choice to continue was entirely his. Before leaving the room, his father added that he hoped Jimmy would one day be strong enough to teach his own children how to protect themselves so they'd never have to face what he went through. Those words stayed with Jimmy, reigniting the determination he'd almost lost. He resolved to give his all in training once again. The following day, Miles and his gang cornered Jimmy and his friends, harassing them as usual. They even went so far as to attack Bobby publicly, hitting him in front of everyone. Afterward, Jimmy found Bobby crying alone and tried to console him. But Bobby, overwhelmed by hopelessness, admitted he felt like they could never stand a chance against Miles and his crew. Jimmy refused to give in to despair and told Bobby that he already had a plan to take down Miles and end the bullying once and for all. When he got home, he immediately hopped on his bike and pedaled all the way to Manny's boxing gym, something he'd never done before, since Mr. Action usually drove him there due to the long distance. Seeing him arrive on his own, full of energy, Mr. Action couldn't help but smile, glad that Jimmy's motivation had returned. In his excitement, Jimmy threw a punch that accidentally hit Manny, knocking him backward. But instead of getting angry, Manny laughed, proud to see that Jimmy's fighting spirit was finally back. From then on, Jimmy trained harder than ever, showing unstoppable drive and determination each day. Noticing his progress, Manny intensified the workouts, adding tougher physical routines and incorporating mixed martial arts into his training. Meanwhile, Mr. Action focused on strengthening Jimmy's mindset, offering constant guidance and words of encouragement to fuel his determination. Back at school, Jimmy told Andy about his boxing training and his goal to finally stand up to Miles. Not long after, Adrian came over to talk to him, and the two decided to start dating. They later attended a party together at a friend's house, where a deep conversation made them realize how well they clicked and how much they had in common. From that moment, they officially became a couple. During the party, Eddie, one of Miles' friends, tried to provoke them with rude comments. But this time, Jimmy, now filled with confidence, stood his ground and forced Eddie to back off.
Come on, Jimmy, this idiot isn't worth it.
No. He's leaving.
Days went by, and soon the day came when Jimmy had to face Miles as promised. He was determined not to be intimidated or manipulated by him ever again. That morning, he woke up feeling stronger than ever, ready to confront his fears. When he arrived at school, Miles wasted no time approaching him, warning that he'd hurt Jimmy's friends if he dared to go back on his word. Later, while in the restroom, Jimmy met a guy named Vinny, who revealed he knew about Jimmy's ongoing conflict with Miles. Vinny, knowing that Jimmy had been training at Manny's gym, offered him some words of encouragement and wished him luck. What they didn't realize was that Eddie had been hiding in one of the bathroom stalls, eavesdropping on their entire conversation. He immediately went to inform Miles about what he'd heard. Following Miles's command, Eddie contacted a notorious troublemaker known as Glass Jaw Billy, asking him to come to the school and fight in Jimmy's place. By now, the tension between Jimmy and Miles had become the talk of the entire school, and students gathered eagerly to see who would come out on top. With newfound confidence, Jimmy walked straight up to Miles and his crew. Miles, knowing Jimmy wouldn't hand over the money, planned to humiliate him in front of everyone with Glass Jaw's help. But before that could happen, Vinny acted quickly and sent his own men to capture Glassjaw, leaving Miles no choice but to face Jimmy himself.
Let's see what you got.
And just like that, the long-awaited fight began. At first, Jimmy struggled to keep up with Miles' attacks, but instead of backing down, he pushed through and stood his ground. Soon, he managed to block one of Miles' punches and struck back, landing a solid hit right on his face. Jimmy was no longer the timid, overweight kid who used to take the abuse without resistance. Now he could protect himself, and he'd made up his mind to use his strength to stand up for others who couldn't. When Miles began losing the fight, his friends rushed in to gang up on Jimmy. But Andy and Bobby quickly stepped in, fighting beside him until they managed to overpower Miles and his crew. After the brawl, Jimmy warned Miles to stop tormenting other students once and for all. Miles, however, didn't seem to take his words seriously. Watching from behind the crowd, Mr. Action couldn't hide his pride. Jimmy had grown stronger, yet he'd kept his kindness intact. Not long after, footage of the entire fight started circulating online, turning the showdown between Jimmy and Miles into a viral sensation.